Hello. How are you all out there in cyberspace? My name is Deirdre Azzopardi. Excited to have you here with me here today. I am from the Northeast of the US, and I've been an occupational therapist for over 30 years. I have been I received my master's in psychology as well. So the psychological aspects of disability are very interesting to me. And then I went on to get my yoga certification and been trained in many different mindfulness techniques, and am a regular meditator myself, which is such an important part of who I am, but also has informed everything I do with autistic learners. I work right now mostly in a school, and I also teach professional development to people who work in schools and to parents. So that's just a little bit about me. This presentation really is not only about teaching mindfulness to autistic learners, but mostly this is about how we approach autism for ourselves. Okay. So, over the years, things have changed dramatically for me. And, when I first started, thinking about when we're meeting with a student or meeting with a child, there was sort of this disconnect where we were, watching from afar and kind of, taking notes on this child. And some of this still kind of continues, kind of people following children with, their clipboards, as if the kid is, so different from us, and that, sort of this disconnect from typical and neurodiverse. And of course, there are differences, but for me, uh, this is more where I'm at. I want to be in communion with the students that I work with. And because of that, who I am and how I approach them always matters. And so that's really going to be the theme through this. And then there's now lots of research to kind of back this up. So instead of thinking of children as, we come in, we have this set plan, we decide how children are going to, do things with us, and what we think about them. Instead, how are we with them, together with them, and really attuning to their nervous systems, attuning to their needs, really thinking about putting yourself in the mind of the child or the adult, whoever you're working with. So here are just some of the frameworks for how I work and what's important to me, and will kind of guide this talk. First, I think the neurodiversity movement and really autistic voices have taught me so much, really more than I learned in all of my programs. I received a doctoral degree, and my entire doctoral degree was on autism. And truly, it was, and I really did such a deep dive and so many years on it, but it really was the autistic voices that have taught me much more about autism than I learned really in all of my schooling. Also, just the human rights model of disability. This idea is what I like about this, instead of like the social model of disability, is this idea that people have, the right to exist in this world. They have the right to everything that neurotypical people have, but they still also need support. So sometimes the social model of disability kind of went too far, and not remembering that people need support. So I really like this model, instead of that very strict medical model, which says that someone, has, when there's disabled, they're sort of on a hierarchy, right below, and we are there to help catch them up. And the human rights model and the disability says, no, people are different and they need support to be the people that they want to be, not the people that we have decided that they need to be. So the other theory that has really informed my work is polyvagal theory. And so we'll talk about that more, but that's why it's so important for me to have my own practices and for me to know my own nervous system, because of the vulnerable nervous systems that are around me, and to just be, understanding how children impact me as well. So how it's, back and forth, how we impact each other. I did a year-long program with Stuart Schenker. His self-regulation framework is something that I think about very much, and I will talk about in this talk. So it's something that informed a lot of what I do. And just to let you know, Stuart Schenker worked very closely with Stanley Greenspan. The DIR, I'm also a DIR practitioner. I didn't really bring that into this talk, but DIR has informed everything I've done over many, many years. I actually was blessed to see Stanley Greenspan live. I saw him, oh gosh, many, many, many years ago. And, his ideas at that time were so revolutionary in autism. So that's for sure. DIR, developmental individual differences, relationship-based approach, if people don't know what that is, has also really informed my work. And of course, sensory processing, as we know, it's now in the DSM that sensory processing is very often part of autism. So it's not something that anymore people are questioning. And for sure, autistic adults have let us know that sensory processing impacts their lives in very important ways. And so, of course, we're going to be talking about mindfulness. So just, I know everyone who's probably listening to this knows the common characteristics of autistic individuals, but just a quick little upgrade, just reminder here, and only because this informs how we do things like mindfulness practices. So, autistic learners tend to be more concrete. So if we're going to be teaching something like, a mindfulness practice, we should make it that it's something that is maybe possibly simpler, something that someone can see, instead of just something that happens inside the body. Many autistic learners thrive with routine. So I teach, just a few different techniques and do it over and over and over again. So, visual over auditory learning. So many autistic learners have difficulty with motor imitation. So if you're going to be teaching things like I teach kids yoga, I do it over and over and over and over again, and I allow kids just to watch. I think, I've seen many kids maybe spend 6 months watching and then they start. So I think that sometimes we do things and then we switch so quickly because we think that, they didn't get it, but we need to keep doing it over and over again. And I don't do hand over hand. I just allow kids to watch. Okay. And then the social skills challenges, and what people have coming to realize is that, yes, children do have social skills challenges, but often it's less when they are with other autistic children or other autistic individuals. And, we as neurotypical people have difficulty also having, social relationships sometimes with autistic learners. So it's really that double empathy problem. Both sides have difficulty. And then, of course, sensory processing differences. And the last one is the executive functioning challenges. And what's interesting about that and why it's important for mindfulness, and we'll get to that later again, is that mindfulness practices, meditation practices help with executive functioning. That has been shown that people who meditate, that the prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, is more developed. Okay. I always have this slide just to remind myself and everyone that we are all of these things. We are not just one. We live in a world that is very mind oriented and forgets about the body, forgets about the spirit. But we need a balance of all of these things. And one of my pleasures in life is helping kids to find joyful movement in their body, helping them to find a lifelong way for them to get into their own bodies. Because when people are too stuck in their minds, and we know this, that's where anxiety often starts and is, keeps ruminations, all of those things happened in the mind. So often it's when we get into our bodies that we can help quiet that noise. So again, just learning how to be in our bodies, which is really, really hard for many people, not just people with autism. So embodiment, learning how to be in your body as the person working with an autistic learner is so important. Really, when we're in our bodies, we're safer. We're safer for other people. So your own movement practices, your own way to shut out the noise and learn how to really come from this place where it feels more solid, where you are just really just a safe haven. So we're going to talk a little bit about polyvagal theory, which is a very large theory, so we won't get into all of it. But it's all about safety, and the person that really is responsible for us knowing about polyvagal theory is Dr. Stephen Porges. The theory has been, around actually for quite a long time, but has really gotten more sort of press lately because of trauma. So during trauma research, we realized that this idea that somebody can get shut down because they don't feel safe has really been proven. So the other thing is just to know that we relate to each other unconsciously, right? So this vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve that connects our mind and body, which are one, they're not really separate. But we actually unconsciously, very quickly, sense each other's safety. So this is all about that idea of co-regulation. When I was in OT school, we used to talk about this therapeutic use of self. And it was funny because it was one of those things that was like, sure, yeah, we all get that. And, but really over time, it's the thing I come back to over and over and over again. Really my best tool is this idea that I'm the tool, not some technique. So polyvagal theory, what has been shown is that, there's three different levels. There's, this level of safety, which is that when we turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, that's that rest and digest. That's when we can engage. That's when we can be social. That's when we can learn. Threat is, right, that fight or flight. We all know about that sympathetic arousal. But what's really important, I think, in the autism world, especially for us to understand, is that beyond the fight or flight is shutdown. So that's when it's so hard that I shut down. So I think that a lot of times when people say that a kid is sort of in their own world, it really could be that they're just so overwhelmed because they don't feel safe. And so they just completely shut down. So when a child is actually progressing and feels more safe, we might see more of the fight or flight. So that's a progress when a kid can say no, when a kid can like really let us know that how they're feeling is actually a good sign in some ways if they've been really shut down. So there's, especially in the sensory processing world, right? When somebody has like low arousal, you might want to, give them activities to kind of wake them up, right? And that can happen where we see somebody who is really low energy and, needs activities to kind of just bring their nervous system up, and we can really push kids to do that. But or are they overwhelmed? So it's really very subtle. How do you know if a kid is shut down or a kid is really in this low state and needs fast movement or lots of sensory stimulation? And I think when we have our own practices, we can feel into this. We can feel when a child is really shut down because they're overwhelmed. And so it's very subtle, but so important. So if you really want to be that kind of practitioner, can really understand these differences, yeah, your own practice is just really vital. So just some environmental considerations when we're thinking about a mindful approach. So it's not necessarily, again, about, teaching meditation or mindfulness, but just what's a mindful approach to autistic learners. So I love this idea of the low arousal versus like overwhelming environments, tons of stuff on the walls. Crayola has, just got everywhere. And I think even with visuals, we have to be careful with the visuals. I think obviously kids and adults need visual supports, but when the entire walls are just full of tons of visual, it's not useful for people. It just can lead to overwhelm. And if you listen to Dr. Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman, he talks about the visual system in general, that once you have something, we know this, we know this, right? If we have something up on our wall and we just leave it there, we start to not see it anyway. We just don't see it. So just having tons and tons of stuff is not useful. So Dr. Damian Milton, I think he's such an important researcher. I don't know if the audience knows who he is, but himself and his son, they both have autism. And so he talks a lot about this low arousal approach to helping kids to regulate, even adults, and especially when people are having, big behavioral challenges, really just taking an overall low arousal approach. And I'm constantly thinking about that. And what does that mean? So low lighting, what's the lighting look like? So again, this is a mindful approach. What's the lighting look like in the room? Do we have those blaring, fluorescent lights? Can we turn those off? I bought a very cheap lamp for my room that I work in, and I actually use it for myself. So like when I come in the morning, I turn off the fluorescents. I just put the small light on, just to let myself, wake up, get integrated into work. And so for certain kids, that's what I do. I just turn off the fluorescents. We just put on the lower lighting, and it really can help. A muted color, not bright colors. And then lowering our volume. And I do this a lot of the kids, especially, kids who are in sort of more of like an ABA program where there's a lot of verbal and there's a lot of instruction. Sometimes people use very loud voices thinking that's going to get kids' attention. But sometimes when we lower our volume, that's when they get attention, right? Because they can just relax a little bit instead of sort of this high energy, high anxiety. And then we have to really be careful about touch. Some children like touch, but a lot of times it's when they initiate, not so much us always. We can use touch if a child likes it, more deep touch, not soft, You know, when we do very light touch, children sometimes feel that as sort of like, you know, like a bug crawling on you. And just less language in general. So not so language heavy. This is so important too, right? Because so many people have challenges with language, is learning how to pause in communication. I took an actual, I think it was about 6 month long mindful communication course where I had to learn how to, I had like a partner, and besides, you know, just taking the regular coursework, we had to learn how to communicate with each other in a more mindful way. And a lot of it was about pausing. So here's the research. Teacher wait time is, in regular education, it's between 1 and 1.5 seconds. So what that means is that when a teacher asks a question, if they don't get a response in a second or maybe a second and a half, they will often ask the question again. And what this does is it doesn't allow someone to actually process. So when they've asked the teacher to, you know, wait 3 to 5 seconds, what the research has shown is that kids then, this is all in regular education, that kids can, you know, they have deeper answers, they have better answers, they use better language. So for our students, you know, they need even more time. And this is really about adults tolerating periods of silence. This has nothing to do with kids. This has to do with us. So many kids, so many adults just don't know how to be silent for a few minutes. So, you know, think about yourself. Do you get nervous? Or can you just let it be quiet? Give a kid a second to be able to answer the question. I mean, I've had many instances where a kid will answer something that I've asked them, you know, 10 minutes later. So it really can take a kid a long time. So if we just keep talking and talking and talking, the kid doesn't have the ability to answer us and to be able to process what we're saying. So my doctorate was really because my project was really about anxiety in autism, such a big problem. So in neurotypical populations, it's around 12%. It might be a little higher now since COVID. But in autistic populations, it's a little under 50%. So by 17, 18, 19, around those ages, early adulthood, not most, but half of kids with an autism diagnosis could also have enough symptomatology to also have an anxiety diagnosis. I was working with, you know, and the reason I ended up doing the doctorate on that was I was working with so many kids where I could see that the anxiety was as impactful, if not more impactful, than their autism, you know, symptoms. And people weren't talking about it enough. And I think one of the like sad, I don't understand why, things within the you know, the world of autism is why we're not working on this right away. Like if we know that 50% by the time they're like by early adulthood is going to have anxiety, why are we not working on ways to help kids with anxiety right from the get-go, right from when they're just first diagnosed? So this is something I talk about a lot, and especially teaching kids like movement, breath, all of these things so early, because when you try to introduce these things when someone has a full-blown anxiety disorder at, you know, 16, it's very hard for, you know, kids to be able to do it. But if this is something they've been doing their whole lives, and it's something that's just part of, you know, their school, it's part of their home life, we just have a better chance of helping kids to, you know, to work through anxiety. So these are some of the reasons, right? just a little cloud here, reasons why kids have anxiety, right? These are just some of the challenges of being an autistic person in a world that is not created for you. So I was just talking about the processing delays, the double empathy problem. Ableism is a huge, huge concern. There's so much ableism out in the world that people are just not talking about, not aware of. It's just so unconscious. Motor planning problems. I think we don't talk enough about motor planning problems. So many kids, really, that's what's stopping them from being able to show what they know. Masking, a big issue that causes anxiety is because people are trying to mask who they actually are. Many kids are very lonely, and that's a big issue. Fear, trauma. Some people just believe that having a disability is trauma. Restraint. Too many kids are still getting restrained all across the world. And restraint we know that it causes just tremendous trauma. But here's the reason that we might be anxious, people who are working within the field. I think that the autism field is so much controversy, right? There's so many different opinions. So I think the different perspectives can cause us to feel like a lot of fear around our own, work. I think fear in general, because sometimes we don't have the answers and we feel really uncomfortable in not having the answers, right? Because we don't feel like we have the skills. Just time pressure, right? These kind of kids require a lot of our time, and sometimes we just don't have it. Just not having the support of our supervisors, just really feeling like we can't handle it ourselves. So just thinking about all of these things are really important. I think we're not talking about it enough, not talking about the burnout of people who work in these fields and how we support people who work with really vulnerable nervous systems. So just talking about stress, and this comes from Stuart Schenker's work from self-regulation. What he believes is self-regulation is just the ability to handle stress. So very simple definition of what self-regulation means. Important for us to understand that stress causes energy depletion. So even good stress causes energy depletion. We get tired when we're stressed. And the other thing it causes is body tension. That's why movement is so important, because movement helps to release body tension. I just can't emphasize enough for ourselves and for kids. But we should also know, right, that kids' stress and self-regulation will be worse as the day goes on. We know this, we know it intuitively, but are we, doing things to help fill the cup back up? Are we doing movement? Are we doing breath? Are we doing things that bring kids joy? That's another way to sort of fill the cup back up so that we're not totally depleted. In the self-reg framework, he talks about 5 domains of stress, all really important. And so these are some of the reasons why autistic learners might be stressed. So some biological, right? Sensory issues, medical, hunger, pain. We know, right, through, really adult autistic people telling us about their own difficulty with things like interoception, understanding their own hunger signs, their own pain signs. And because sometimes kids have real medical issues. And, when they do studies on, and this is, another one of my passions, when they do studies on adults with autism, often they're not moving, they eat very poorly. And some of this is because of the treatment approaches from when they're young, just a lot of, sugary foods, foods that give them quick energy but deplete them. So then they have these medical issues when they get older. And, the statistics on autism and death is it's very eye-opening if you really look at it. People are not healthy as they get older. So some of the emotional fear, changes in routine, loneliness, trauma, right? So we know this. Lots of kids, lots of adults do not have people in their lives. There's lots of fears around, living in a world that's not always friendly to them. Routines change. Life, there's lots of changes. So these are just really important considerations. So some of the cognitive, right, we were saying those executive functioning challenges, just really, that's a major part of autism, sometimes not understanding, so language challenges. And so that's social stuff. So the communication challenges, kids are still bullied. Unfortunately, adults are bullied. And then lastly, so these pro-social, just meaning that there's not enough accommodations. This is looking pro-social. He means like kind of looking at this society at large, the larger community, things like ableism. This is bamboo, obviously. And this is just my little take on some of the sensory processing. We're not going to get into all the sensory processing in this small, short Facebook Live, but what I like to think about with sensory processing is thinking about this idea of bamboo. So when bamboo is just this magical plant or tree, because it has very strong roots, right? A very intensive root system, but it's flexible, right? So bamboo is the one thing that can stand, through a hurricane when all these, mighty oaks are down. The bamboo tends to be able to handle changes. That's what I like to think about with, a sensory processing system that is optimal. We can handle changes. We can handle what's happening internally, what's happening externally. So just thinking about this, I like to think about what sometimes children have difficulty with is the environmental senses. So the outside. So when people touch them, so the outside touch, vision, like things coming at them, or just being overly doing a lot of self-stimulation with vision, auditory, being like things are too much, wearing headphones, those kind of things. So all of that stuff can be too much. Smell, it can be really, really hard for kids, and taste. So all of these things come from the outside. But the internal senses, when we help kids to really have that good sense of proprioception, when we give them movement experiences to help their vestibular system, when we teach kids to be able to, or adults, to be able to tune into their internal system, then they can have more of that root system. They can have more where they feel more solid, so that the outside world, those environmental senses, tend to not take them off course so much, and they can rebound, right? Because they have that internal sense of themselves. So these things are really important to teach to kids, to work on for ourselves. Mindfulness, the definition that most people talk about is Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition. Jon Kabat-Zinn, really the kind of father of modern mindfulness, especially here in the West, where I'm tuning in from. He was a doctor who, studied meditation and said, wow, I should bring this back. He created the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, MBSR, in the 70s. It is now, been studied thousands of times for every population, and really even a lot of the children's mindfulness programs have been based on this original mindfulness-based stress reduction 8-week program. What his definition, which is the one that most people think about, is this idea where we're paying attention purposefully, like we know we're paying attention, and in a kind way, in a non-judgmental way. And the reason for the lady in the shower is one of the analogies is like actually being in the shower when you're in the shower. most of us, when we're in the shower, are really 10,000 other places. We're thinking about what happened yesterday. We're thinking about the day ahead. What he says is you don't have to sit on a meditation cushion. You could actually just be where you are. And what the studies show is when we are where we are, when we actually are present in our individual experience right now, like while you're watching this, if you're actually just watching it, that we're happier, that we just tend to be, we just have better lives when we're, in our bodies. So it could just be as simple as when you take a shower, notice how it feels, notice the warmth, notice the smell. Notice what the sound of the waters, sounds like. As I said before, mindfulness develops the prefrontal cortex, that executive function. So things like attention, memory, regulation, and the ability to control our impulses. I mean, if you're working in this field, you realize that all of these things are vitally important. All of these things are vitally important for us as well. So this is something that has been well studied now, that this prefrontal cortex really is strengthened by a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice. The other researcher, though, that I love to let people know about, especially because she's sort of not as well known in the world of mindfulness with children, is Ellen Langer. Ellen Langer is a Harvard researcher, and she does not talk about like techniques for mindfulness. That's not really what her work is about. She really just talks about mindfulness just as this idea of noticing and just being like in your world, being very present and being open to the idea that everything is just like, is not as solid as we think it is, that the world is, the world, that the way that we believe things to be may not be true. And so really what she studies is mindlessness. She studies a lot about aging, but she also has done some studies with autism that I think are really interesting. And what she believes, and really from my experience, what I believe, is that autistic individuals just may be more sensitive to others' mindlessness. So what she studied, she did one study who showed that she had two groups of adults, one that was really mindful, where they paid such really attention to the child and really, noticed their nuances, looked at their emotions, watched their body language. So being very mindful. And then one that just gave like positive support, but not so mindful. And what they found was when they did, when people who were not, did not know about the study were watching, they found the kids that were with the mindful adults were more collaborative. There was a decrease in their stereotypical behaviors. So really just very interesting. And I would love to just even read something that came from her, a recent book that she just did that I thought was really worth telling you about. So this is her writing. I also think it's worth questioning whether part of the problem many adults have in connecting with children on the autism spectrum lies with the adults, not the children. These adults may have difficulty reading the cues that autistic children display, or are unmotivated to try to do so because of their own biases. If adults were more mindful, they would be more sensitive to those cues and would probably interact better with the children. Yeah, so I think that is really what I was, when I read this, I was like, yes, that's what I believe to be true for a very long time. This is the other thing that's really important in autism to understand is this heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is that we want it to be large, not small. The heart, you want to be able to, your heart to go up and then it to come back down, right? So there's this like range variability. Now, what they have found with autism, which is really interesting, even looking at like with sleep, is that autistic individuals on average, they have a small range, meaning that often their heart rate is a little elevated and it doesn't come down. So it just kind of stays in this elevated state, so that anxious state. Heart rate variability is helped, makes sense, through exercise, right? Because our heart is a muscle. And so if the muscle is working better, it can come up high and then it can come back down. But it's also helped through mindfulness. Yeah, lower heart rate variability for anxiety as well, right? Because they're staying up high. So again, a lot of kids or adults with autism have things like depression and anxiety. So just really this idea of the heart rate variability, and heart rate variability has to do with health. So again, we have to think about the long-term implications of the kids that we work with, not just in this moment. Kristen Neff is a really important researcher to think about with autism for two reasons. Self-compassion is really, really important, but the other reason is that Kristen Neff herself, and she is the chief investigator of self-compassion. Many, many, many studies she has done on it. But she herself has a child with autism and with some significant needs. And so she talks about her own journey with her son and her need for self-compassion. And one story that she told that I think is really poignant is that when she was on an airplane, her son had, and so I can, if people are watching this who have children with autism, her son had like this massive meltdown on an airplane, so she's on the plane. I mean, there's not much you can do. And, she started to feel herself to escalate. And then she sent herself a message of self-compassion that right now, there's nothing I can do. And it's okay to feel really sad about what's happening right now and to send herself love. And she said, when she did that, like when she turned herself from this, getting escalated to giving herself compassion for the place that she was in, her son's meltdown stopped. So really important. She talks about three aspects of what self-compassion is. So it's this idea of kindness versus judging yourself. So especially for caregivers, really, really important for them to understand that judgment is everywhere and they're always going to feel like they need to judge themselves, but really to send themselves kindness, because everyone is questioning what they're doing, and no one has all the answers. And it's so hard because everything is out there to tell you that this is the way to do it or that's the way to do it, but really to send yourself some kindness. The other idea, and I think is really important, is this idea that everyone feels this way, so this idea of common humanity, instead of feeling isolated in your thoughts, like that you are this bad person and you're the only one in the world who's feeling the way that you're feeling. And then this idea of mindfulness, over identification with your feelings, like thinking I am this, I am that, instead of being more mindful, what, I am not my feelings, I am not someone who can't handle this, just over identifying with whatever's happening in the moment. Anyway, so the studies is what they show. When people are more self-compassionate, they have more resilience, less depression, anxiety, kind of makes sense, and just overall, just a better sense of well-being. This, I just kind of threw this in here because I found this to be really helpful. And this is just a mindful way to look at behavior. This is coming sort of from that self-compassionate, but to have a little positive self-talk. So, I talked about when her son had this behavior. It could just be like a mantra that you say to yourself when your child or when the kid that you work with is having, a big behavior. Something like, I got this, or peace begins with me, or, I'm strong, I can handle this. Something that you say to yourself immediately. So if you want to do something like this, you have to practice it over and over and over again. You really have to practice doing this, especially practice it when the child isn't having the behaviors, right? Because we know that our own nervous system, when we get into fight or flight, it's hard for us to think. So again, practice, practice, practice. And then do some time of inaction, something to help us to learn to ground. It could be like, that you always take a breath, something really physical in your body. It could be that you rub your hands together. It could be a lot of different things. It's something that feels good in your body. It could give yourself a little hug. Again, sort of anchoring the mind. We say something, we anchor in our body, and then we proceed. So this is just for the adults. So the child's having the behavior. This is for the adults. Before we then interact with the child, we're in a better place to interact. So here's just some of the research studies in the autism field on mindfulness. There are many. Okay. The biggest amount of studies in the autism field really is with autistic children, but also with their parents. A lot of studies with parents. What they have found is that when parents involve themselves in a mindfulness practice, that they have decreased stress, and they just feel better about the parenting journey. So the MBSR program specifically, that 8-week program, has been used, in many different studies. This, I think, is extremely important. There was a study where they went into staff into institutions where they had developmentally disabled adults. And when they brought mindfulness in for the staff, that there was a reduction in the amount of restraints that were used. I'm just going to tell a quick story that was told to me by someone who worked with the person that we're going to talk about next. And this person who did, okay. Oh, seeing here, we've already crossed the line. We're done. Okay. It's only 45 minutes. Sorry about that. If you would like to get in touch with me, I'm the Mindful School OT, and thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, I can continue? Okay. I just had like 2 more slides. Sorry about that. I thought it was an hour. Okay. Okay, so the next study was really about mindfulness-based stress reduction and using MBSR, so mindfulness-based behavioral supports together. So that helped kids with their behaviors and helped parents to feel less stressed about the children's behaviors. And lastly, they went in and taught mindfulness in school to autistic children, and it really helped them with their executive function. So that was a really nice study. This is just a really important study, and it'll be the last one that I talk about here, is this idea of the soles of the feet meditation. This was by Dr. Singh, this study, but it was replicated actually with different researchers in China. They took a group of aggressive adolescents who were having, multiple incidences of aggression in a week. And they taught them this simple soles of the feet meditation, which basically is you turn your attention to your feet. And I took this training. Basically, you just practice this very, very often. And you just, you start just by practicing, like just putting your attention on your feet. And you could just even think in your mind right now, like think about your feet. And because it's a very neutral place to put your attention, the training is you do it often, very, very often, every single day, more than one time a day. You just keep bringing kids' attention to their feet. And then you start to have kids do it when they're happy, and have kids do it when, something just slight happens, so that it's so in the child's body that it helps them to be able to bring it in when they're really having a much harder time. This is really important to understand. And this will be really the last thing that I talk about, is this idea that, and I'm just going to go past my nervous system, that if you want to teach, children with autism, these with techniques, it's practice, 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 practice. It has to be practiced when kids are not in a heightened state. It has to be practiced often by the adults. And you just pick one or two techniques and you practice so much. And just even for ourselves, then it comes in, it becomes a natural thing to bring in when you're heightened. Because remember, you can't have all these different techniques in your head, because when we're heightened, we can't think. We can't, our prefrontal cortex shuts off. So yeah, it could just be a simple breath. There's so many practices, but just a simple breath, a soles of the feet meditation. Really happy to, if you want to reach out to me with more ideas, I will stop sharing. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. If anyone has questions, they can leave it. They can leave it for me, and I'm happy to reach out to them with the answers. So I thank you so much, and I hope this was helpful. Take care.